figure out some way to provide for Jay financially. And that is something that worries me.
Ken, thank you for sharing that with us. We can visit them.
As we plan for Jay's future, we're in a sense are planning for Amy and Kate's future.
Yeah.
And even though it's not fun to think about those things happening because we love each other so much, it is part of living is to plan for how you go on living when things happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's just, I mean, I think that something we need to think about is Kate and I are, you know, when I'm 18 and Kate's 15, and really think about Jay's future, and I think these are important things we're talking about, but we also need to realize, you know, that for me, I mean, I'm just trying to get through the semester, you know, in school, and, you know, I think that, you know, it's hard for me to try and think, well, when my parents die, you know, that hopefully I'll be at least 35, you know, I mean, I hope that it's going to be, you know, another 20 years or so, you know, but, you know, that, and I think it's important for me to think about these things, you know, what's going to happen with Jay, you know, it's Jay and Kate and I, and we're striving to keep together, but hopefully we can keep this firm base in Lawrence, because I think that there's a lot of resources here and there's a lot of people that care.
Isn't that amazing? Thank you, Kate. And we had no idea Kate was wondering about the money. I mean, you had to create a context where these things can come out, you know, and we needed to hear that. And the next morning, I remember before she left for school, her father and I were trying to give her an overview of how Jay's money would work, you know, when we died. We didn't want her to worry one more day after we knew that she had that worry. But Amy's saying, I'm just trying to get through the semester. You know, so it's talking about these difficult issues and also recognizing that we have to live in the present. So some of the things that we did with the solving of problems, you know, with this group, Jay loved music. There was the top music therapy program in the country was at the University of Kansas. And so we were able to invite the person who was in charge of that program into one of our meetings and to talk about how we could have a student music therapy intern every semester that just added great joy to Jay's life at no cost. And Jay learned to play 2 chords on this guitar, and they were color-coded green and red. And he felt so dignified, you know, and so proud to be able to play, you know, the guitar in this way from the music therapy student. This meant that when we had parties at Jay's house, you know, that he was often the center of attention. And on the sofa here's another different music therapist, and Jay singing great songs. Kate, what are some of the songs you remember Jay singing?
A lot of Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Simon and Garfunkel, and John Denver.
Yeah, and he made up this song. Have you seen my sister Katie? He loved Katie so much. And Katie, Katie, do you know that song? You're the only girl that I adore. So it brought a lot of pleasure. One of the things that Jay really enjoyed was his girlfriend. And often we don't build in opportunities for people with disabilities to belong to someone in a meaningful relationship that is important to them. And they would get together, and mostly it was around music and around being with one of the music therapy interns, and had a really wonderful time. I mentioned earlier a taxi, and I want to just, you know, this story could go on, but there's more to cover, so I'll abbreviate it. But one of the task of the action group was, how could Jay use public transportation? I was really afraid that if he was in a taxi, he might be bullied. If he was in a taxi, somebody might try to steal any money that he had. If he was in a taxi, God forbid, somebody might drive off to some private place and sexually molest him. I mean, you can come up with all of the reasons why this wouldn't work for a place for Jay to belong in public transportation. And so the group talked me into it, saying that we needed to give this a try and that I was the one designated to go to the local taxi company and talk with them about my fears and concerns and what they could do. And I really wanted Jay, if we think again about Emily's dimensions of belonging, to be befriended. And could he even be needed as a taxi rider, you know? So I go to the little trailer on the fringe of town that was the local taxi company, and I go in, and Shirley was the person there who owned the taxi company with her husband, and she was dispatching. They had 22 drivers, and she was dispatching. And when she had a break, we talked, and she asked me about my worries, and I was really embarrassed to tell her my worries because it was like I was questioning her people, you know, but she was very open and understanding and supportive, and she kept drawing me out as if a therapist that's better than ChatGPT would draw me out, you know, yeah, that it was, she did just this amazing job of affirming all of my fears. And then she opened her desk drawer, rickety kind of desk, and she got out two kind of crumpled, these aren't crumpled, I couldn't find pictures of crumpled cards, but there was a red card and a green card, and put them down. I said, Shirley, what are you doing? And she said, Anne, I'm taking your red cards. I'm taking your red card of fear of bullying. I'm taking your red card of fear of stealing. I'm taking your red card of fear of sexual molesting. And I'm giving you my green card of friendship. I'm giving you my green card of understanding. I'm giving you my green card of support. I'm going to be here with you, and Jay Turnbull is going to learn to ride the taxi and enjoy it. Can you believe it? What I learned from that experience, I want you to take to your heart, that some of the people who you think might not be the reliable allies for the enviable life that we had wanted for Jay, a life with no second-class citizenship. Some of those people are in your communities. And she said, I'm just a taxi driver. You're from the university. She said, but every day I get up and ask the good Lord to let me take up as many red cards as possible and to give as many green cards as possible. I challenge you, every one of you, to give green cards. To give green cards to people with disabilities, to give green cards to people who are learning English as a second language, to give green cards to people who are seeking security and safety in this crazy world of ours, and to take their red cards. And as you do that, people will reciprocate. What goes around comes around. As you give green cards, you get green cards. As you take red cards, people take your red cards. And that's something I learned from master teacher Shirley from the taxi company. So with group action planning, we have these 5 dimensions. The last one is celebrating success. And I want to show you this. The meeting that I've shown you snippets of was not a typical meeting because we were talking about such a heavy subject, like what happens if we die. But I wanted to do something special, and part of creating connections is ensuring that people understand how much their support means. You know, and remember, we're trying to make this totally opposite from an IEP meeting. You know, so how do we celebrate the fact that we have gathered to talk about the scariest subject in our life? And it's been okay. So, number 9.
Great thing, I think, if we all open a candle, is that every candle that people have is a different color. If you kind of look around the room, they're all the same size, but they're all a different color. And every candle is a different fragrance. And which one are candles? If Ron and I were the only support for Jay, that it's just this much light that could generate for his life. And as hard as we worked, or as much as we tried to do, it would still be just the one family life. We kind of go to sisters and they add to his life, and each of you here add. We look at all the lights. And as Rudd said earlier, I think one thing that we learned when they said to us, what are you going to do when you fail, is that it was going to be better for us to light a candle than to curse the darkness. But it's really all of the light from all of our candles that make this possible. And Rudd was saying earlier, we want to underscore it so much, that the lights that shine here for Jay shine for each of you. And that as we look around the room, I really hope that we all have a sense that one of the greatest things that people with disabilities need is to have people to belong to, but it's one of the greatest things that we all have. And through coming together for Jay, we come together for each other.
Well, can I say something on behalf of Jay? So I mean, you have honored me with great compliments and with great help, and I always have the sense that I feel like when you talk, is that you owe it to me, and that I'm giving you a great favor. And I have never expressed that connection that is, I'm sure that the way guys here around the room, they probably will share the same feelings. And what I want to say is that I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to interact with Jay, not because he's so great and he's so amicable and likable and such a good friend, but because what I think that you're doing, it is really unique. And you are pushing the frontiers of mental retardation into being not so much an exclusive disability, but more like an inclusive disability that everybody has to share. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this enterprise.
Five years ago, we couldn't volunteer. And the exciting thing for all of us is with all of the different gifts and talents represented all the different colors of the candle. What will the year 2000 be like in January? What will 2010 be like? What will 2020 be like? So we all fit in this room.
Okay. Wasn't that wonderful? It was such a bonding experience for all of us, as you can imagine, you know, to just celebrate how far we had come as a group of committed friends. So I want to show you, this is where we started, remember, with going to the fitness center. And this is what the group ended up putting together. The green is the work, the letters in there, JC, stand for Job Coach. The red is leisure community participation. The blue is the music, the dark blue is the music therapy. The light blue is the personal care. You can see how he ended up with such a full life. And I am so thankful that when God called him home, he was at the top of his game. And it wasn't at the time of being at the bottom of his game with being excluded from the community program. How many of you know the song Swing Low, Sweet Chariot? No? Many of you know that? That was the song Jay sang with the music therapist the night before he died, the last song he sang on this earth. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. You know, and it wasn't 12 hours later that the sweet chariot came. You know, I'm so thankful that he lived what we call an enviable life, a life that we would want to live for ourselves. So the take-home message is, my dear friends, that you can best achieve the enviable lives through fostering friendships with people who care. That's how you get to belonging. You need a village of friends to meet goals on a regular basis. Families can't do it by themselves. Teachers can't do it by themselves with all the good intentions. Remember that friendships are reciprocal. What goes around comes around. The more you give, the more comes back to you. Friendships are key to enviable lives. You know, Jay's home was key. Jay's job was key. Jay's church, participation was key. But all of those were characterized, they were key because he belonged in all of those settings. And the hope is that friendships will endure after parents die. So the best way to deal with this angst of families, what's going to happen when I die, is to build the relationships. Now, I want to show you some things that I hope will inspire you. This is my friend Carolyn Schroeder, who started out with this young man, Michael, as a psychologist when he was 3 or 4 years old. Some of you are preparing, or you are psychologists or therapists or other kinds of human service workers. Carolyn started working for him, and she became a lifelong advocate. Michael is now 65 years old, and Carolyn has been with him the whole time. His parents now have died. You know, Carolyn helped with all of that transition. And she is the one now who makes sure that Michael has an enviable life. You can't stay with 10 people for a lifetime, probably. You can't stay maybe even with 5 people. But maybe you can be a Carolyn in staying with 1 or 2 people that you work with as a teacher when they're young, and you show up in their life across years and decades, as Carolyn did and continues to do. Carolyn is now 85, and she is still going to meetings advocating for Michael. Now, Kate, you will recognize this top picture of Ross Edwards, our friend, the guy in the back. And I'm not sure this was in college. I tried to get the youngest picture I could find. But the guy who started Jay and the Fraternity started a chapter called Natural Ties on the University of Kansas campus that has gone on now for 30 years. And they match people with disabilities to campus organizations. Ross was matched to the KU band, and he was matched to Kelly, who was the person on the back row in the left, and her boyfriend in college, who later became her husband. And they became friends when Kelly and her husband Justin and Ross were all, young adults. The bottom picture is 50 years, it's not 50 years, but maybe the bottom picture is this last Thanksgiving. When Ross is still part of Kelly and Justin's family. Kelly and Justin were housemates for Ross, kind of along the lines of Jay's housemates. And they stay in weekly contact with him. And it's been at least 30 years. Friendships that you now have with people with disabilities, you can stick with one or two of those. So that in 30 years at the holiday like Thanksgiving, you gather and that person belongs. And they are needed and missed if they're not there. Emily's work, along with Eric Carter, is with a lot of congregations. This is a link. You can find this handout, and they've got the link to this handout, don't they? We'll just count that as number 10. Okay. And this is a network of churches nationally that reach out, that have an active disability ministry. But they're churches who are having their members take a covenant to affirm responsibility for sustainability to a member, one or two members with disabilities in their congregation. And they take this very seriously. They have, in some of them, they use the language of having trustees to oversee this. And when some trustees retire, they replace them with other people. In your place of worship, regardless of your denomination or type of faith, there can be a welcoming not only of people with disabilities in services, but to make commitments to withstand the test of time and to have to commit to that person. And these are two wonderful resources that Eric Carter recommended that are actually from I believe they're from the Amish community. And they provide detail of congregations enfolding people with disabilities for enviable lives. The Arc of California. I don't know if all of you know what the Arc is. It's the largest national and state-based organization advocating for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They have a huge new project on caring futures, on what to do over time to support people with disabilities. This is a link to their work, and I encourage you to go to this and to consider what resources are available right here in your own state. In innovative housing, we don't have time to visit these websites right now. These are wonderful websites of options other than congregate living with groups of people with disabilities, but inclusive living in the community. In Hope, North Carolina, is a group that I'm affiliated with that is having in several huge new apartment complexes, about 25% of the units dedicated for people with disabilities. And to have what they call an inclusion facilitator, someone to work on site, to establish ties with neighbors, to arrange transportation, to help make services possible. I encourage you to learn about what's cutting edge in terms of inclusive housing. And finally, these are two different groups that do procedures along the lines of group action planning. And you can learn more about how you gather your reliable allies, how you gather your friends and family of choice, and how you envision an enviable future, and you work together person by person to implement that. So in closing, my dear friends, we get back to the road. Jay could have stayed on the segregated road. He could have gone to the state institution like the local program advocated, to get his behavior under control. But fortunately, with the help of a lot of people, he was able to take the inclusion road. So I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and Jay took the one less traveled by, and that made all the difference. And so I just want to say today, I say a prayer to Jay's spirit in the universe, and to his father's spirit, because Rudd died about a year ago. So they both are celebrating the life that Jay was able to live. And they both will be a prompt and an encourager to you that you can take this path and you can be the person who transforms the lives of people with disabilities by sticking with them across decades. Thank you very much.